Hey, it's Eric. Got a bit in tonight's video. We're going to be highlighting a very interesting article that just came out by the National Catholic Reporter. It validates the entire Jesuit Vatican conspiracy. They're frankly admitting to it in Rome's own press, that being the National Catholic Register. So I'll show you that here. But the article in question is about the current CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, meeting twice with the Jesuit Pope, that being Pope Francis, last year. Met him twice, the current Pfizer CEO. And we know the Pfizer CEO is already a main attendee at the Vatican Health Conference in 2021, which I've been covering in detail on this channel. The Vatican Health Conference, which no one seems to be covering in the alternative media. That's just an interesting observation I've made. But the Vatican Health Conference took place. It started May 5th, 2021. And you had the CEOs from all the biggest medical companies in the world there. You had all of the top professors from all of the various schools of public health across the university, across all the prestigious universities in the world, like Paul Farmer, the who received his Sword of Loyola in 2013. Paul Farmer, the head of Harvard's School of Global Public Health. He was Paul Farmer was an attendee at the Vatican Health Conference, but so was the Pfizer CEO. Of course, the Moderna CEO, Stefan Bonsell, was at the Vatican Healthcare Conference. I have the video on my channel of Stefan Bonsell essentially admitting to being a Jesuit. And it's amazing how that hasn't become more wide known in the truth community. But yeah, so we're going to go into that. It's just very interesting how in this article from the National Catholic Register, they're admitting to the whole conspiracy. On that end, though, I recommend this great book here, Code Word Babylon by P.D. Stewart. You see, this is book one in a series. You see that there? Oh, right here. But this is fantastic. I recommend everyone check this out. It's about 500 pages or so. I'd give this 10 out of 10 so far. You see the subheading, The Sons of Loyola, that being the Jesuits, and their plans for world domination. See here, Jesuits created modern Freemasonry, IHS, the Roman god Janus, the double-headed god Janus. Okay, so we're going to go in here, though, to the story about Pfizer. So I'm going to share my screen. Share the audio. And I'm just going to show you the headline of this. And before we get into the story, I'm going to show you an historical quote from Giovanni Niccoloni's great book on the Jesuits, written in the 1850s, about how a Jesuit priest, while undergoing his novitiate, is assigned to a hospital where he must stay. We see here's the article, Pfizer and the Vatican. Again, this is from the Rome's own press here, the National Catholic Register. Pfizer and the Vatican. Some sources say Pope Francis met privately twice last year with Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla. And we're going to go into these. I'm going to show you the comments in this video. Albert Bourla has called people who criticize his vaccine criminals. And he openly admits to working with the CIA, the Catholics in Action, and the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Inquisition. The CIA and the FBI, as I've shown on this channel numerous times, are totally captured by the Jesuits in Rome. You had a Roman Catholic, Wild Bill Donovan being the official founding father of the CIA, and you have a Roman Catholic, Charles Joseph Bonaparte, being the founding father of the FBI. But Alberto Burla, he says here he was speaking to the Atlantic Council this November. He says that he's been working with the CIA and FBI to target, quote, misinformation. There's the article there, right from the Vatican's own press. And it's very revealing, and we'll see as we read the article. Here's a quote here from Giovanni Niccoloni's great book on the history of the Jesuits. You read here on page 46 under the section The Novices. We have already seen the process a candidate must go through before being admitted into the house of the first probation. After undergoing a still more searching scrutiny there, he passes to the house of novitiate. The novitiate lasts 2 years and may be shortened or prolonged at the general's pleasure. That being the Jesuit general, current Jesuit General Arturo Sosa. You should watch the video I have on my channel where Arturo Sosa says that CV19 is not an accident. From his words, not mine. CV19 is not an accident. According to the Jesuit General Arturo Sosa, there are 6 principal exercises by which the novice is tried. They are as follows. And you see here one, the novices are to devote a month to the spiritual exercises, self-examination, confession of sins, and meditation, and to the contemplation of the life of death, resurrection, and the ascension of Christ. 2, and here's where you see the hospital part here. They, the Jesuit novices, are to serve for another month in one or more of the hospitals by ministering to the sick in proof of increasing humility and entire renunciation of the pomps and vanities of the world. 3, they, the Jesuit novitiates, must wander during a third month without money, begging from door to door, that they may be accustomed to inconvenience in eating and sleeping, or else they may serve in a hospital for another month at the discretion of the superior. And we see here, here's a case of this. There's a Jesuit priest here, Father Michael Rogier, S.J., who, while he had part of his Jesuit novitiate, was being stationed at the none other than the World Health Organization. This is from the Jesuits' own website here. It's safe to say that before the last quarter of 2019, the circle of people who had given significant thought to pandemics was relatively small. Not Jesuit Anthony Fauci, evidently, who said on January 10th, 2017, that there was almost guaranteed to be a surprise outbreak in the incoming Trump administration. Father Michael Rogier, Society of Jesus, S.J., was among that group. Of course. He spent 7 months of his Jesuit formation at the World Health Organization, which of course now has a permanent observer status at the Vatican. Or the Vatican now has a permanent observer status at the World Health Organization. Essentially, it goes both ways, as we see here. If you go to my Jesuit World Order page here, type in Tedros on the search bar. It's from the WHO's own bulletin. H.H. Pope Francis and WHO Director General. Quote, health is a right and not a privilege. There you go. There's a photo of them there. We see now officially the Holy See is a permanent observer at the World Health Organization. Again, the Vatican set up the World Health Organization, just like how they set up the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. Current director of the World Bank, I know David Malpass, went to Jesuit Georgetown University. You see here, this is from 2018. The Director General of the WHO, Tedros Adhanom, has met with His Holiness Pope Francis. Here's what he says here, quote from the communist Tedros, head of the WHO. I am honored and he's a Catholic communist, Tedros. I am honored and humbled to have met His Holiness Pope Francis and to discover that we share so many of the same concerns. Bringing us back into the Dark Ages. For many years in previous occupations as well as current positions, we have both worked to improve the lives of poor and vulnerable people. Oh, would you look at that? I am delighted to have Pope Francis' support for our effort to extend the right of life and health to all people. I particularly welcome the Pope's emphasis on the welfare of children. Well, how fitting now, too, that it is very sad to see, but it's just very fitting that we're seeing children all over the world beginning to DIE after taking the CV19 VAXX. Here's an example of here from my community page. From Argentina, tragic story, 3-year-old girl died the next day, almost instantly after she took her CV19 VAXX. Her name was Amber Suarez from Argentina, the Pope's home country. I know the current Argentinian president is Jesuit trained Alberto Fernandez, a devout Roman Catholic. So there you go. What we see here, Tedros continues, I am encouraged to hear him, Pope Francis, say that he is beside us and all those working with us in the attempt to bring health to all, especially the many people, including children, who live on the periphery of society and who suffer from ill health and hunger. And again, well, that's just, black magic. Of course, Helena Blavatsky was right on when she wrote that the Jesuits not only practice occultism, but black magic. And to that end, they owe much to their power and influence. We see here Pope Francis and communist Catholic Tedros met in Rome in advance of the Global Conference on Primary Health Care in Kazakhstan. There you go. We see here the Jesuit priest Michael Rogier, S.J., part of his novitiate was done at the World Health Organization. Yeah, so I recommend you check out those. I'm going to link all these in the description. We see here, so back to the National Catholic Register, Pfizer and the Vatican. It's coming right out in plain sight. I'll show you here. I put up a post on my Jesuit World Order not too long ago where Pfizer's drug Viagra, before Pfizer got Viagra approved by the FDA, they actually sent executives to the Vatican to meet with Pope John Paul II, a good friend of Jeffrey Epstein, pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. You can see the photo of them together. And Pope John Paul II gave the blessing to Viagra before it was approved by the FDA. Of course, Viagra is Pfizer's sex drug. The Catholic Church is disgusting and criminal, so it makes sense that the Pope would be supporting that endeavor. We see here's a photo of Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla talks during a press conference with the European Commission president after a visit to the Pfizer biotech factory in Tours, Belgium. This came out just last week, January 15th, 2022, here, Vatican City. The Register has learned that Jesuit Pope Francis, privately held undisclosed meetings with the CEO of Pfizer last year. As questions arise over the efficacy of the vaccines in preventing transmission. And yet the Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla, just said like 3 or 4 days ago that the two doses of his VAXX offer limited, if any, protection. But of course, the Vatican said, all the Vatican's like unlimited intelligence and resources at its disposal. It somehow didn't know that the Pfizer VAXX wasn't very effective. Amazing. The Jesuits, according to CIA agent E. Howard Hunt, are the greatest intelligence service in the world and always have been. But that they somehow didn't have the data on Pfizer's VAXX. And we see here that the Vatican in this article, they spin it saying that, the Vatican was very encouraged by how Pfizer was reporting that that the VAXX had a 95% efficacy rate. We see here, as questions arise over the efficacy of the vaccines in preventing transmission, which are now being mandated for all Vatican staff and visitors. According to Vatican sources, the Holy Father twice met with Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla at the Vatican, although the precise details are not known. Unlike most papal private audiences, these meetings were not announced by the Holy See press office, which did not respond to repeated requests to confirm the meetings. Of course not. A Pfizer spokesman said, quote, "We can't confirm or deny, as per our policy, the movements of our executives are considered confidential." Well, again, Pfizer, I'll show you the documentation. They have a documented track record of sending executives to the Vatican, so this no doubt happened. Bourla's meeting with the Pope would not be the first of such unannounced papal encounter in recent years. In November 2019, shortly before the CV19 health emergency began, the Pope privately received Melinda Gates. Of course, Melinda Gates is a devout Roman Catholic, and I'll show you. I have the video of her on my channel saying that her great uncle was a Jesuit priest, or her mom's great uncle.
Controversial idea. When I grew up in a Catholic home. I still consider myself a practicing Catholic. My mom's great uncle was a Jesuit priest.
There you go.
Catholic. My mom's great uncle was a Jesuit priest. My great aunt was a Dominican nun. She was
Of course, the Dominicans set up the Inquisition back in the 13th century. Murder Incorporated.
a school teacher and a principal her entire life. In fact, she's the one that taught me as a young girl how to read. I was very close to her. And I went to Catholic schools for my entire childhood until I left home to go to university.
There you go.
And I went to Catholic schools for my entire childhood until I left home to go to university. And in my high school, Ursuline Academy, the nuns made service and social justice a high priority in the school. And today in the foundation's work.
Oh, I bet. Just like how the nuns were, they were up to a lot of social justice in Ustashi, Croatia also, right?
I believe
where the nuns were involved in the massacre of over 800,000 in less than a span of a year's time.
I'm applying.
Or I can show you here the article from the New York Times where it documented Nazi Germany. Nuns were injecting children with poisons. If you don't believe me, here it is. You can go right to my Eric Bowman 77 archive.org page, type in New York Times in the search bar, and the article will come up. I'll let that load here. While it's loading, I'll go look at the chat. Melinda's from Dallas, Texas. Absolutely. Actually, in Melinda's, this is documented in a post that N. Goods wrote up on Jesuit World Order. But Melinda writes about how she was actually educated as well at the Dallas Preparatory School there in Dallas, which is a Jesuit institution. Yeah, but here's the article here for Catholic nuns participating in absolutely horrifying butchery and savagery in Nazi Germany. Murder factory found in Bavaria. See here, July 4th, a wholesale extermination plant in which hundreds of men, women, and children, all Germans, allegedly mentally defective or physically deformed, were killed by intramuscular injections. Or slow starvation was operating here until 2 days ago. It was disclosed today. You see here, the plant functions in this town 60 miles southeast of Munich, and virtually every inhabitant of the Kaberin was aware of the fact that human beings were used as guinea pigs and systemically butchered. The perpetrators or passive collaborators were in no way conscious of a sense of guilt. With a few exceptions, they were Germans who were not Nazi party members. Some were Catholic sisters and nurses. I'm going to repeat that. Some were Catholic sisters and nurses. The chief nurse confessed that she had murdered approximately 210 children in 2 years by intramuscular injections. So there you go. The Catholic Church is satanic. Well, okay, but we're going to get back here to the article on Pfizer and the Vatican. And of course, you can see Melinda Gates, photos of her at the Vatican in 2019, what this article is speaking of. There he is there. There she is meeting with, or actually, here's another one, 2014. She's been to the Vatican many times. There she is meeting with Jesuits and Pope Francis there in St. Peter's Square. And if you just go on the Jesuit World Order search bar, type in Gates on the search bar, you can get all sorts of information. Here's a photo of Bill Gates with Joe Biden's current Jesuit priest, Leo Donovan, from November 28th, 1995, right there. It's the same Jesuit priest on the left that gave the invocation at Joe Biden's inauguration ceremony, January 20th, 2021. He was also on the board of directors at Disney. This Jesuit here, Leo O'Donovan. How fitting at Disney with all the pedophilia imagery that comes out of their programs that they have a Jesuit on the board. They truly are the rulers of evil. They have all sorts of information here. You can see the Jesuits, the Gates Foundation has funneled hundreds of millions of dollars to the Jesuits personally, directly to all their universities, and that's just from what they put on their website. Obviously, I recommend you check out this article here. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a Jesuit missionary congregation. um, of course, Bill Gates went to Catholic Church due to the relationship with Melinda. They're supposedly saying now in the media that she left him due to concerns with Epstein, but I think that thing's whole of root. I bet he was just trying to sell off stock. That's what he was doing. I mean, here again, this is the Vatican Health Conference that I mentioned here. This is a post Nick did up on it. The Fifth International Vatican Conference 2021, the Ignatian Year. Quote, exploring the mind, body, and soul, May 6th to 8th, 2021. And this article here from the Catholic Press on the Pfizer Vatican conspiracy goes into this. We see here the meeting, well known in the Vatican, was not announced and has never been officially acknowledged. That being the Pope Francis's 2 meetings with Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla. Last May, Bourla took part in an online Vatican health conference titled, quote, or last May. And again, this is the Vatican Health Conference I was just referencing. Bourla took part in an online Vatican Health Conference titled Unite to Prevent and Unite to Cure that included a significant focus on CV19 treatments and prevention, as well as providing a platform for promoting VAXXs produced by the large pharmaceutical companies. They get right in plain sight. And it's just incredibly telling that no one in the alternative media seems to be covering that Vatican Health Conference that took place in 2021. Other speakers at the meeting, co-hosted by the Pontifical Council for Culture, included Stefan Boncel, CEO of Moderna, and another large anti-CV19 VAXX producer, Dr. Anthony Fauci, SJ, Jesuit Inquisitor. And we see here Fauci is Roman Catholic, Joe Biden's Chief Medical Officer, U.S. President Joe Biden, and Dr. Francis Collins, who is a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. He was then director of the U.S. National Institutes of Health. The whole puppet show is there. They're all there. Here's the list. Vatican Health Conference. Look at the puppets for yourself. They're all right there. Of course, you had the Jesuit Inquisitor Anthony Fauci kicked off the conference. You know, it wouldn't be an inquisition without that. You see here, you can see all the puppets. Lots of CEOs. You see Mark Benioff, chair and CEO of Salesforce. He's also on the Vatican's Council for Inclusive Capitalism, which that's another organization I recommend you look at, the Council for Inclusive Capitalism. You got Emma Bloomberg, the daughter of puppet papal court Jew, mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg. Albert Bourla, you see here, chairman, CEO of Pfizer. He's there at the Vatican Health Conference. Executive chairman, Firefly Health, Jonathan Bush Jr., part of the Bush crime family, directly related to U.S. President George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush. Jonathan Bush Jr. is probably Skull and Bones like them. So you, John F. Crowley, chairman of the board, CEO, Amicus Therapeutics, attended the Vatican Health Conference. Judy Faulkner, founder, CEO of Epic. Rebecca E.G., CEO, LSU Healthcare Services, former Secretary, Louisiana Department of Health. You got Lori Gilmshire, president and CEO of Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. She's a professor at Harvard. You got Robert J. Hariri, founder, chairman, CEO of Cellularity. You got Ryan Howard, founder and CEO of 100 Plus. You got Henry G., attended the Vatican Health Conference, chairman, president, and CEO of Sorrento Therapeutics. You got Aaron J. Kowalski, president and CEO of JDRF International. You got William M. Lee, president and medical director and CEO of the Angiogenesis Foundation. We got Shelley Lyford, president and CEO, Gary and Mary West Foundation. We got, let's see who else is part of the puppet show here at the Vatican. We got Gary Mendel, founder and CEO of Shatterproof. We got Maria Millen, president and CEO, California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. We got Emmanuel Manny Onhomi, president and CEO of Samaritan Feet International. We got Roy Schoenberg, president and co-CEO of Amwell. And we got Gerald W. Shelton, chairman, president, and CEO of Cryoport. So that's just from typing CEO in on the search bar. You type in chief. You got Amy Aberney, former principal deputy commissioner and acting chief information officer, U.S. FDA. And of course, the FDA approved Pfizer's CV19 jab on August 23rd, an anniversary date of the St. Bartholomew Day massacre, which saw Roman Catholic savages murder over 100,000 Protestants in France. We got here Stefan Boncello, Chief Executive Officer, Moderna. And of course, I'm going to show you, if you haven't seen the video on my channel, Stefan Boncello essentially admits to being a Jesuit. And I'll play that clip here for you. Here, he said this 2 days before the Vatican Health Conference started.
Very much.
And here he is speaking to the French Jesuit Alumni Association.
When we first started this interview, you said that you had a good remembrance of your years in France and at the Jesuits. Could you elaborate a little bit on this? Tell us, because you were at the Jesuits in Provence, in Marseille, first in your high school years, and then you moved to Versailles with Ginette for your prep school years. Huh?
Brainwashed by the Jesuits his whole life. And that's why now he's the CEO of Moderna. And a company that didn't make any VAXXs before this one now has one of the biggest VAXX CV19 VAXXs in the world. Just reminds me how it just lined up perfectly for the Jesuits. You know, it must just all be a coincidence. How you also had the CEO, Robert Ford of Abbott Labs, who essentially has a monopoly on CV19 testing. The CEO of Abbott Labs, Robert Ford, went to Jesuit Boston College. Must just be, it's all coincidence, though. The director of the CDC, right when this started, CV19, Robert Redfield, who went to Jesuit Georgetown University.
How would you rate the impact it has had on your life and your way to be the fantastic entrepreneur that you are now?
Thanks for the kind words. The impact that being with Jesuit has had has been very profound. I mean,
very profound. He's a Jesuit puppet. He'll do whatever the Jesuits tell him. He's a puppet on strings.
I actually started even before high school, in middle school. So when I was 12 years old is when I entered the Jesuit.
When I entered the Jesuits, he says.
So when I was 12 years old is when I entered the Jesuit in CESIAM.
He entered the Jesuits when he was 12. That's the CEO of Moderna.
Profound. I mean, I actually started even before high school, in middle school. So when I was 12 years old is when I entered the Jesuit in CESIAM. And the piece that has been remarkable for me is,
there you go. So I recommend you check out this whole video. Like this, it's a 2 minute and 30-second video clip. I got it on my channel. Check that out there. That's the Moderna CEO, Stefan Boncel. He was awarded a Pontifical Hero Award right around this time, also, for being a great inquisitor for the Pope. Okay, back to the National Catholic Register article here. You see, Vatican City State was one of the first authorities to administer VAXXs after it signed a contract with Pfizer in late 2020 to exclusively offer its Pfizer biotech pharmaceutical product to its staff. The first inoculations were rolled out in early 2021. A strong proponent of the VAXX in light of what is believed is a, quote, continuation and worsening of the current health emergency, the Vatican has been mandating the Pfizer injection for all staff and visitors since December 23rd. I'll repeat that there. The Vatican has been mandating the Pfizer injection for all staff and visitors since December 23rd. From Jan 31st, triple VAXX, 2 doses plus the booster, will be required to enter Vatican territory. There you go. Proof of recent recovery from CV19 can also gain admittance, and there are no requirements for public liturgies and general audiences. But the mandates have been imposed when effectiveness of all the CV19 VAXXs at preventing spread of the disease is being questioned. In December 2020, Professor Andrea Arcangeli, director of the Vatican's Health and Hygiene Directorate, said the Vatican chose to use the Pfizer VAXX because in clinical trials, it had been, quote, shown to have been 95% effective, which is totally full of shit, which I'll show you here shortly. He added that, quote, subsequently, other VAXXs produced with different methods can be introduced after evaluating their effectiveness and full safety. 95% figure means that VAXXed people had a 95% lower risk of getting CV19 compared with the control group participants in trials who weren't VAXXed. So in other words, Pfizer was telling the public that it's in its own clinical trial, VAXXed people were 20 times less likely than the control group to get CV19. However, in a January 10th interview with Yahoo News, Albert Bourla, Pfizer CEO, acknowledged that the first 2 doses of the VAXX are now largely ineffective against the spread of the Omicron or moronic or oncomer variant, and that although Omicron is, quote, milder than previous variants because of the high infection rates, hospitalizations have been, quote, going much higher in terms of severe disease, ICU occupation, etc. We know that the 2 doses of the VAXX have very limited protection, if any, Bourla told Yahoo News. And I referenced that comment that he made earlier in this video. And then Bourla, who's pimping for the Pope, continues here. The 3 doses with the booster offer reasonable protection against hospitalization and death. Again, and actually, here's an article here from where did I have this posted here from Clark County Today, and this goes into and actually there's a recent. We'll have to see how this plays out recently. So you might have seen the story how a federal judge recently ruled in the U.S. that now, because originally the criminals at the FDA and Pfizer, the Vatican puppets, had decreed that it'll take 75 years for all the data to become public on how the Pfizer VAXX was approved. 75 years. But now I think this will be overturned by some Jesuit-trained judge on the appellate court or the Roman Catholic puppets on the U.S. Supreme Court. They'll overturn this. But you might have seen how a federal judge ruled that now Pfizer has like essentially 2 or 3 years now to release all the data versus 75 years. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I just can't see that actually happening. It's going to be blocked by some Jesuit puppet judge. We see here the lawsuit, or the group that was successful in this initial lawsuit, was the Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency. You see here, it was formed specifically to, quote, obtain and disseminate the data upon which the FDA to license the CV19 vaccines. Of course, the FDA approved the Pfizer VAXX on the anniversary of the St. Bartholomew Day massacre because we are being subjected to a massive Jesuit inquisition, which is bringing us back to the Dark Ages. Society will be organized much how it was in the 13th century. The only difference is now that we have Mark of the Beast technological capabilities. We see here on August 27th, 2021, 4 days after the Pfizer VAXX was approved for ages 16 plus, this nonprofit organization comprised of public health and medical professionals, scientists, and journalists submitted a FOIA request to the FDA of all the data within Pfizer's CV19 VAXX biological product profile. When no response was forthcoming on September 16th, PHMPT sued the FDA for the information. The lawsuit, quote, asked that this information be disclosed in 108 days, the same amount of time it took for the FDA to review and license Pfizer's VAXX. In a response that beggars belief, the FDA first requested until 2076 to release this data, not to analyze it, but simply to release it. In a brief last week, the FDA extended that timeline to 2096, a 75-year delay. They disclosed that the documents they ostensibly reviewed before approving the shots amounted to 451,000 pages. An initial 12,000 pages have been released. And it's very interesting, just from the initial 12,000 pages, what's been released. They revealed that, quote, of the 42,086 adverse events cases in the initial 3-month period, 13,104, or 31%, either died or had a long-term permanent side effect following injection from which they had not recovered. In that group of the 42,086, there were 1,223 deaths. Wow. Of the 274 pregnant women who reported adverse events, 75 of them, 27%, were significant, including miscarriages and stillbirths. Of 133 breastfeeding mothers, 13% of their babies had an adverse effect from exposure to the injection through breast milk. This is from Pfizer's own data. 34 children under the age of 12. So you wonder why they wanted to wait till 2096 to approve this. And again, just how the process that they went through to approve Viagra, it will, I guarantee, it will come out in these documents that they got guidance from the Pope, moral guidance before getting these vaccines approved. I guarantee they send a team to the Vatican just like they did before Viagra. You see, 34 children under the age of 12 inadvertently received the injection. That age group was not supposed to be included in the trials. 24 of those 34 children, 70.6%, had serious side effects. 13 of them, quote, unresolved. And here's a quote from a Canadian doctor here, Daniel Nagass, quote, "This is irrefutable evidence that from Pfizer themselves that this shot is dangerous." So they know that the shot is dangerous. So does the Pope. But I'm going to show you here later this article that now the Pope is saying that it's getting the Pfizer VA-XX is a moral obligation, and if you don't do that, you're playing into baseless misinformation. So we'll see that here in a bit. That's a good point, Jeremy. That if the world is around from 75 years from now, yeah, who knows? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned Francis Collins there, Josh. Francis Collins, if people aren't aware, he's a member on the Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences. And the Pontifical Academy of Sciences is like the oldest scientific body in the world. It predates the British Royal Society. We right here, continuing on the National Catholic Register's article, despite the original 95% efficacy rate against the earlier variants that prompted the Vatican to sign a contract with Pfizer, Vatican personnel have been continuing to contract CV19 in the Vatican over the past year, despite being double or triple VA-XX. The latest case is that of Bishop Brian Farrell, Secretary of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, who's currently infected with CV19 despite having received the booster shot. An official at the Pontifical Council told the Register this morning, quote, "He has tested positive, but we expect him to be back in the office next week," end quote. Vatican sources have also told the Register that as many as 14 Swiss guards have contracted CV19 in the second half of last year, but the cases were never reported. All of them had 2 Pfizer doses, but almost no symptoms. Vatican has reported no cases of hospitalizations or deaths since the VA-XX rollout, and throughout the pandemic, no CV19 deaths have been reported in Vatican City. However, since the VA-XX program began in early 21, the Holy See Press Office has ceased reporting new cases of CV19 in contrast to 2020, when it regularly announced if any personnel or residents had been tested positive for the virus. Well, again, none of the statistics mean anything, worldwide. I was watching China and Censored channel the other day, and it showed some of the recent Chinese statistics, and they say that it's something like they've had like 2 COVID CV19 deaths in the last like 6 to 8 months in a country of over 1 billion people. Like it's a joke. So you got communist China underreporting their cases, and the mainstream media takes it at face value. And here you got the Western world completely over-reporting all their cases, and the mainstream media takes it at face value. Total Jesuitism. As we progress towards a new one world socialist world government. But however, since the VA-XX program began, we read that here. The last reported Vatican staff to be infected were Cardinal Giuseppe Bertello, then president of the Vatican City State, and the papal almoner, Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, in December 2020. Despite concerns about the Pfizer VA-XX being tainted by abortion, and actually that was part of the videos from Project Veritas showed that there are fetus cells in the Pfizer VA-XX, and you should watch those videos from Project Veritas where Pfizer scientists admit on camera that natural immunity gives stronger protection than their own VAXX. And that's just another interesting thing. If you read the Raised Project Veritas report from the Marine, that DARPA document from Marine Colonel Joseph Murphy, Marine Colonel Joseph Murphy actually theorizes that, or he gives a lot of, I think, circumstantial evidence, and he doesn't show the documentation, but he links the actual specific grants in his paper. But he claims that CV19 itself was a reverse engineered, live attenuated bat VAXX, that they were reverse engineering to get to that from the human SARS virus. They're taking SARS, reverse engineering it into a live attenuated VAXX for bats that then they would release via aerosol up into the Yunnan caves in China. Very interesting, very interesting to say the least. And he writes about in that little 4-page memo about why the mRNA VAXXs are not effective, because CV19 is essentially already a VAXX. Very fascinating stuff. We see here, despite concerns about the Pfizer VAXX being tainted by abortion, Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin appeared this week to rule out any conscious exemption right. Of course. Yeah, it doesn't matter if there's a aborted fetus cells in the VAXX. Think the Vatican's going to care? They've been investing in abortion companies since time beginning. And actually, very interestingly, Pfizer bought out the company Wyeth in 2009, the same year in 2009 that the Roman Catholic Pax Bank in Germany, which is 100% owned by Catholic clergy, was investing in Wyeth in purchasing abortion pills, that being the Catholic Church investing in abortion pills. In addition, they were also investing in nuclear submarines, fighter jets, and tobacco. There's the documentation here. And the company Wyeth, you see here, W-Y-E-T-H. Here, the Catholic Pax Bank is responding to a report by Spiegel, which had revealed that the Pax Bank in Cologne in March invested in the equivalent of 158,868 euros in the securities of the U.S. pharmaceutical producer Wyeth. Among other things, this produces pills for contraception. There's your pro-life Vatican for you. In the same year that this scandal comes out, Pfizer gobbles up Wyeth. Amazing. And of course, on the last stream I did with George, we talked about some of the current Pfizer executives. You have their current CFO, Frank D'Amelio, is Jesuit trained at St. Peter's College and Roman Catholic St. John's University. You got Bill Carapezzi, current executive vice president of global business services and transformation at Pfizer. He was Jesuit trained at Fairfield University. See right here. And then you got Randy Johnson, chief of compliance, quality and risk officer, executive vice president. He went to Jesuit Georgetown University Law Center. Of course, the former FDA director, Scott Gottlieb, who was at the Vatican Health Conference in 2021, he's on the board of directors now at Pfizer. You see, Pietro Parolin told the Register that Vatican's employees seeking an exemption because they oppose the VAXX's link to abortion seems not to be justified. It's not justified. Yep, you have to put the aborted fetal cells into your own body. Yep. If you wouldn't do that, you'd be a misogynist and a racist, as our Jesuit-educated puppet Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said here in Canada. Devout Roman Catholic Trudeau, who will do anything that the Pope tells him to do, and the Jesuit Archbishop of Ottawa, Terence Pendergast, SJ. So you see here the exemption to aborted fetal cells being injected into you is not justified, according to Vatican Secretary of State Pietro Parolin. And I'm going to do a future video on it. Pietro Parolin gave the official Vatican statement on the net zero climate cult brigade recently, and the Vatican is, of course, one of the main entities that's pushing for the quote net zero, again, which is a fascist cult. And I'm going to do a future video on a Catholic writer at Cambridge University actually openly admitted, like he openly writes that we need to have an authoritarian society, democracy no more. We need to embrace fascism to fight climate change. And that was from Ross Mitiga, who is educated at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile. Here's his Cambridge University article promoting fascism right here. We have political legitimacy, authoritarianism, and climate change. I recommend you give that a read. He's promoting fascism. That's the best way I can describe this. And he writes about how all the compliance we're seeing with COVID is very intriguing, that we can just do a full-out fascist dictatorship to fight climate change. Another interesting just side fact here, just a 9/11 black magic ritual. September 11th, 1572. You actually had a papal celebration. Pope Gregory XIII ordered a joint celebration for the commemoration on September 11th, 1572, for the defeat of the Muslim Ottoman troops. How fitting that September 11th, 2001, a false flag attack was falsely blamed on Muslim, quote, terrorists. And here you got the Pope doing a commemoration on September 11th, 1572, for the defeat of the Muslim Ottoman troops by the Holy League at the Battle of Lepanto on October 7th, 1571, and for the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. They also celebrated the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre on September 11th, 1572. Of course, I mentioned how St. Bartholomew Day Massacre took place August 23rd, 1572, and the Pfizer VAXX was approved by the FDA on August 23rd, 2021, to commemorate the Roman Catholic barbarism which took place at the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. You see here, the Pfizer biotech VAXX has also produced adverse side effects, including heart ailments and blood clotting, especially in younger recipients. And this is coming from the Catholic press. So the Jesuit Vatican conspiracy is being exposed by their own press, with some causing death. The U.S. Catholic Disease Center, or more known as the U.S. Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, insists that, quote, these reports are rare, of course, and the known potential benefits of CV19 vaccination outweigh the known and potential risks of these side effects. Of course, they'll say that like the puppets of the Pope that they are. Thousands, and we continue from the article, thousands of these and other cases have nevertheless been reported on by government sites in various countries, where suspected side effects can be voluntarily reported, and citizens have created websites to record their own testimonies of adverse effects from all CV19 VAXXs. Again, so that's from the Vatican's own press that you're seeing here. The Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla met with the Pope twice last year. And here's a video of Albert Bourla saying that you're a criminal if you criticize him or his VAXX. And he admits here to a collaboration with the Jesuit organizations, the CIA and the FBI. The FBI literally has 2 annual conferences at Jesuit universities every single year. You have the ICSS conference that takes place at Fordham. IC International Cybersecurity Conference. Every single year, the FBI goes to Jesuit Fordham University and has this conference, the International Conference on Cybersecurity. And of course, the FBI also has their Boston conference that they do at Jesuit Fordham every year. FBI, Boston College, hosts 5th annual Boston Conference on cybersecurity, right in plain sight. Founder of the FBI, Charles Joseph Bonaparte, viewed non-Catholics as heretics. He did. He literally did. You can read. It's documented history. The founder of the FBI viewed non-Catholics as heretics. Again, that's why I've been saying over and over again that it's Romerica. The United States of Romerica. So here's the video of Albert Bourla admitting collaboration with the Pope's FBI and CIA. CIA is also more commonly known as Catholics in Action. And that was admitted to by the Catholic Herald. Again, the Rome's own press outing the CIA as Catholics in Action.
there was some fake news during this period of time about the vaccines, all sorts of conspiracy theories. How did you deal with that, and how did you navigate that, and where do you feel the primary source of this sort of fake news was? How damaging was this to us?
I'm afraid it was quite a lot damaging, and there was, particularly with us, we were targeted by a lot of, let's say, dark organizations that you don't really know the ownership. You suspect that there are some countries behind. We were getting a lot of briefings.
Some countries would be behind this. What a joke! I think this is a veiled reference to Project Veritas. Yeah, you should watch those Project Veritas reports on the corruption inside Pfizer. I think that's who he's referring to in a veiled way.
From CIA, from FBI about.
You see, they're working with the FBI and the CIA, the Pope's FBI and the CIA to combat misinformation. The Pfizer CEO. What's the Pfizer CEO doing contacting with the FBI and the CIA? It's the Jesuit Vatican conspiracy. That's what it is.
You suspect that there are some countries behind. We were getting a lot of briefings from CIA, from FBI about.
We're getting a lot of briefings from the CIA and the FBI. His own words.
About attacks that may happen to us, cyber attacks, I mean, but also about the spread of misinformation.
Spread of misinformation.
There are two groups of people, right? There are the people.
Of course, I'll show you. The Pope just said that it's misinformation, which causes people to not want to take the CV19 and VAXX.
There are people that are skeptical about the vaccination, and both of them are afraid. Those that are getting the vaccine, they are afraid of the disease, and they believe that because people are not getting vaccinated, they are increasing the risk to them. They're increasing the exposure. So they are, let's say, mad with them that they don't get the vaccine. Those that they don't get the vaccine, they're afraid of the vaccine. And they are mad with the people that are pressing them to get it.
And
those I understand. Yeah. They are very good people. They are decent people. That they have a fear. And I understand it. And they don't want to take chances. But there is a very small part of professionals which they circulate on purpose misinformation so that they will mislead those that they have concern. Those people are criminals. They're not.
You're criminal. How dare you not repeat exactly what we say and what the Pope says and what the mainstream media says? How dare you do that? You're a criminal if you think for yourself.
Bad people.
That's
what he's saying. Because they lead a very small part of professionals which they circulate on purpose misinformation so that they will mislead those that they have concern. Those people are criminals. They're not bad people. They're criminals.
How ironic is that this guy is calling us a criminal, and his VAXX will end up murdering thousands of children across the world, and he's calling you the criminal. Shows you the Jesuitism there. So here on CV19 VAXX's Pope says healthcare is a moral obligation. This came out again January 10, 2022, NPR. Here, Jesuit Pope Francis suggested Monday that getting VAXX against this CV19 was a, quote, moral obligation, and denounced how people have been swayed by, quote, baseless information to refuse one of the most effective measures to save lives. Francis used some of his strongest words yet, calling for people to get VAXX in a speech to ambassadors accredited to the Holy See, an annual event in which he takes stock of the world and sets out the Vatican foreign policy goals for the year. Francis, 85, has generally shied away from speaking about VAXX nation as a, quote, moral obligation, though his CV19 advisory board has referred to it as moral responsibility. Rather, Francis has termed VAXX as a, quote, an act of love. And right after Francis said that getting VAXX was an act of love, you had the total puppet U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, who covered up for Catholic pedophile clergy in San Francisco while she was DA there. She said that getting VAXX was an act of love, like the soulless puppet that she is. And then Francis said that refusing to get inoculated was, quote, suicidal. It's suicidal to not take the CV19 vaccine, according to the Jesuit mafia don Francis. He says here on Monday, he went a step further, saying that individuals had a responsibility to care for themselves. And quote, and this translate into respect for the health of those around us. Healthcare is a moral obligation, he asserted. Francis continued, frequently people let themselves be influenced by the ideology of the moment, often bolstered by baseless information or poorly documented facts, he said, calling for the adoption of a, quote, reality therapy to correct this distortion of human reason. So any information that you get from an information channel that's not controlled by the Pope and his criminal syndicate, that's misinformation. That's what that means. VAXXs are not a magical means of healing, yet surely they represent, in addition to other treatments that need to be developed, the most reasonable solution for the prevention of the disease, he added. No mention of the early treatments for CV19 that have been suppressed worldwide. No mention of that. That's something else that's in that Project Veritas document from Major Joseph Murphy. It writes about how early preventions are more effective than the mRNA injections, and it breaks it down. I recommend you check that document out. Some Catholics, including some conservative U.S. bishops and cardinals, have claimed VAXXs based on research that used cells derived from aborted fetuses were immoral and have refused to get the jabs. The Vatican's doctrine office, however, said, quote, it is morally acceptable for Catholics to receive the CV19 VAXXs based on research that used cells derived from aborted fetuses. Of course. Francis has repeated his call for universal access to the shots, aka universal vaccine mandates. Francis calls for, particularly in the parts of the world with low VAXX rates, and calls for revisions to patent rules so that poorer countries can develop their own VAXXs and then forcefully mandate them upon their own populations. And then if they refuse, you can always resort to fascistic means of control to get them into submission. It is appropriate that institutions such as the World Trade Organization and the World Intellectual Property Organization adapt their legal instruments lest monopolistic rules constitute further obstacles to the production and into an organized, consistent access to healthcare on a global level. Isn't that just amazing, Jesuit doublespeak there? Again, at his Vatican Health Conference, he has the leaders from the world of the health monopolies there. Yeah, he's condemning it. I mean, it's just amazing. No one wins the biggest full of shit prize. Like no one is a bigger contestant for the biggest full of shit prize than Pope Francis. Not even close second place in that race there. But if you want to read the article here on Viagra being approved by the Pope before search that into the search bar here. I titled this post, former Pfizer employee Jamie Reedy writes that Viagra was blessed and given approval by the Pope prior to its official approval by the FDA. Here's a quote from his book, Hard Sell. This is a Pfizer salesman who's writing this. My parents hoped I would grow up to be a doctor or lawyer. Boner maker never made the list. On paper, it may not appear to have been an important or dignified job, but I'll bet the men for whom Viagra worked would argue differently. Even the Pope validated what we were doing. Would you look at that? Even the Pope validated what we were doing. In a brilliant marketing move, Pfizer contacted the Vatican to get its approval, which they no doubt did this with the CV19 jab. I would guarantee you that, and that's going to come out in the documents over the next 75 years. In a marketing move, Pfizer contacted the Vatican to get its approval, its blessing, if you will, of Viagra. There had been concern within Pfizer that the Catholic Church might oppose Viagra because it would undoubtedly be used by unmarried couples and masturbating men. Two church no-nos. They're not two church no-nos. Fortunately, the Pope chose to focus on the benefits Viagra would provide married couples, declaring that Viagra would restore vitality to many marriages. He enthusiastically supported the introduction of the little blue pill. Viagra may not have resulted in an increase in church attendance, but it certainly caused many parishioners to scream out the Lord's name for the first time in years. Pfizer executive Jamie Reedy writes. Here's the Wall Street Journal covering this in 1998. They say here, in an unusual move, Pfizer recently sent a delegation to a Vatican Committee on Science to brief members on Viagra, engage the Catholic Church's possible reaction. See, I have this meeting here documented by like 5+ sources. It's an historical fact that Pfizer sent executives to the Vatican before it got Viagra approved. And then they used scientific rhetoric and exaggerated statistics to promote erectile dysfunction, or to promote the drug. They exaggerated the problem of erectile dysfunction. So this was largely a result of a work of a handful of Pfizer investigators and consultants who claimed, adapted, and expanded the medical category ED, and armed with scientific rhetoric and medical legitimacy, became visible spokespeople for the product and the medical problem. These spokespeople, with the help of journalists, constructed a sexually dysfunctional populace, a market primed and ready for Viagra. Here I write that surely Viagra is used at the 2017 drug-fueled sex party that was discovered at the Vatican by Vatican police. The list of drugs was not revealed by the press. Also not revealed was the name of the priest, an aide to one of Pope Francis's key advisors, that was arrested. And here's the article from the NY Post. Vatican cops bust drug-fueled gay orgy at home of Cardinal's aide. Here's the article here. So I recommend you check that out. Yeah, I think I'm going to finish this video here. I'm just going to go through some of the comments. There you go. The Vatican's own press is admitting the Jesuit Vatican CV19 conspiracy. I agree, Mr. Duffy. Prosecute the prosecutors that won't prosecute. I agree. As Herbert C. Holdridge said, the great U.S. Army Brigadier General, any public official that collaborates with this enemy of the human race, that being the Vatican, should be arrested and court-martialed for high treason. And I 100% agree. Vatican is the enemy of the human race, and if you're a public official going along with the Vatican, you are committing treason, and you should be arrested for treason, as General Herbert Holdridge wrote. Yeah, but I think that's all for this one, guys. Oh yeah, definitely. You got that's the psyop there with China, Chris. They say that lockdowns work because China has so few cases when the case count is so laughably, ridiculously fake, that a country of billions of people has such few cases. And of course, the World Health Organization, the Vatican World Health Organization, with Roman Catholic Tedros as the Secretary General there, again, who the World Health Organization has their permanent observer status at the Vatican. They completely whitewashed China's response to CV19 at the beginning of this. They said that China is doing they actually said that China is doing the noble and right thing to do by using the excessive lockdowns. And at this time, China was welding people into their own houses, full-on militarized repression in the streets. And the WHO said, yeah, they're doing great. Look at the numbers. And the numbers were fake. This is a grand Jesuit Vatican conspiracy. And again, this is the coronavirus pandemic. You have Saint Corona as the patron saint of pandemics in the Roman Catholic Church. Saint Corona, coronavirus. And you have the UN Secretary General. I'll just show you this before I take off. This is in a video kind of compilation of clips I put together on the current Roman Catholic Secretary General of the UN. This was obviously no doubt a huge ritual, but in 2019, right before the CV19 pandemic started, he actually received the Roman Charlemagne Prize, named after the Roman Emperor Charlemagne, in Aachen, Germany, at the Aachen Cathedral. And guess what? The Aachen Cathedral is where the remains of Saint Corona happen to be. This is a massive Jesuit ritual. We'll see here. This was admitted to by one of his secretaries here. This is Antonio Guterres, devout Roman Catholic, has a PhD honorary degree from Jesuit Georgetown, current General of the United Nations. Here he is deputy admitting that he received the Charlemagne Prize, and before doing so, he went to a pontifical mass at the Aachen Cathedral, and again, that's where the remains of Saint Corona are. So we'll watch this here.
Good afternoon, everyone. On Thursday morning, the Secretary General received the 2019 Charlemagne Prize in Aachen, Germany. In his remarks, he said that as a committed European and Secretary General of the United Nations, this prize is especially meaningful for him, and that through him, tribute is being paid to the commitment, service, and sacrifice of the women and men of the United Nations. He referred to the European Union and the United Nations as two of the greatest projects of our times. He told the participants in the ceremony that he never felt so clearly the need for a strong and united Europe, adding that the failure of Europe would inevitably be the failure of multilateralism and the failure of a world in which the rule of law can prevail. The Secretary General also encouraged Europeans and their leaders to maintain the values enshrined in the UN Charter of
And that's why all of the founding fathers of the EU were Roman Catholics. And recent chairman of the EU, Jean-Claude Juncker, said that the EU actually got its foundation, or when it was blessed by Pope Pius XII, Hitler's Pope in Rome in 1957. And of course, if you haven't seen the photo, that when the EU recently signed their constitution in Rome in 2004, they had the statue of Pope Innocent X in the background. How fitting there. Pope of the 30 Years' War, the first 30 Years' War. Second 30 Years' War is more commonly known as World War I and II. But here's a photo of statue of Pope Innocent X overlooking the signing of the EU Constitution in Rome. Of course, we see here that the current Jesuit puppet, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, will be blowing up the European Union. But we see here the comments about the Aachen Cathedral are coming up here any second.
Human rights and in the European Convention on Human Rights. Europe, he said, cannot be premised on us versus them, adding that scapegoating migrants and closing our doors to asylum seekers does not protect but shame this heritage.
And of course, as a great Jesuit puppet, the UN Secretary General is doing exactly what his boss, the Jesuit General, tells him to do. And here's the article here from Breitbart. Jesuit chief, referring to Arturo Sosa, the same Jesuit who said that CV19 is not an accident. No country has the right to turn away migrants. That's right. Doesn't matter if the illegal immigrant has raped 500 children. You have to bring him in because you're a racist misogynist if you don't. According to the Jesuit general, no country has the right to turn away migrants. Of course, that's why the UN Secretary General, like the puppet he is his spokesman is talking about multilateralism.
The Secretary General reminded the audience that the 1951 Refugee Convention was initially adopted to protect millions of displaced Europeans in the post-war period. While thanking the authorities of Aachen for awarding him the prize, the Secretary General said that he would do his best to defend passionately the values of pluralism, tolerance, dialogue, and mutual respect to build a world of peace, justice, and human dignity. Prior to receiving the prize, the Secretary General and the other dignitaries attended a pontifical mass in the Aachen Cathedral.
Catch that?
Prize, the Secretary General and the other dignitaries attended a pontifical mass in the Aachen Cathedral, immediately from the us and human dignity. Prior to receiving the prize, the Secretary General and the other dignitaries attended a pontifical mass in the Aachen Cathedral. Prize, the Secretary Justice and human dignity. Prior to receiving the prize, the Secretary General and the other dignitaries attended a pontifical mass in the Aachen Cathedral.
There you go. Attended a pontifical mass in the Aachen Cathedral right before the CV19 pandemic started. It's kicking off the massive Jesuit ritual, which we've all been subjected to the last 2+ years. Quarantining at home, that's Ignatius in the cave. That's what the stay-at-home is. Yeah, I think that's all for this one, guys. Peace and love, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.